Hi everyone, I'm Ben, and this is the Board Game Blueprint. This week, we're going to be talking with Joe Slack, an established designer, writer, and event coordinator within the industry, about how he knows when a project is complete. So let's jump on over to the recording studio next door and see what we have in store. Awesome. I think it's starting. And yep, I just see a little recording in the top left. So let's get this interview started.
Let's do it.
Joe Slack, good morning to you up in the Great White North.
Hey, Ben, how you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well. Thanks very much. Thanks again for being on here. This is going to be kind of our first sort of podcast episode released on the Board Game Blueprint, which is a show that I like to do with the Game Crafter in association with them. And Joe, I finally got to meet you in person at a Proto Spiel, Michigan, some 3 years ago now, I think, after interacting and supporting each other for a while on social media. Could you tell the audience a bit about yourself and some of your favorite past projects to date?
For sure. And thanks for having me on the first podcast episode. I'm just honored to be here, and it's always great to talk to you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we're going to see how well it works out, since most of our stuff is uploaded to YouTube, which is a more visual medium, but I think we'll have some pretty cool visuals for this episode when it goes up. So please take it away. The floor is yours.
Very cool. Yeah, it was great meeting with you too. Unfortunately, I don't think we got to sit down and play any games, but that often happens at a Proto Spiel. Like, oh yeah, we got to sit down and play one, and then the whole weekend goes by and you don't get a chance. But
too often.
Yeah, it's totally. But it's all awesome interacting with you here and at the Proto Spiel online events. We got to chat quite a bit on those, which was fantastic. But yeah, so some things that I'm working on or have been working on recently. I launched my first successful Kickstarter, Relics of Rajavahara, which is a solo puzzle game this summer. It went very well, and I'm just in the process of moving towards manufacturing with that. I hosted an event this year as well called the Board Game Design Virtual Summit, which was a big success. I had over 550 people join to hear from 18 different people in the industry, all sorts of different people, from designers to publishers, to rulebook writers, content creators, everything. We just covered everything. And those are a couple of the big projects. And in addition to that, I've written 3 books on game design. I've taught some game design and development at Wilfrid Laurier University. And of course, as a game designer, I have lots of games on the go. And I have 5 games that are either published or about to be published right now.
Joe, congratulations abound. I don't know if I can even list off any accolades even close to what you've accomplished so far. That's absolutely amazing. And I'm so excited to hear, that more is on the horizon. Absolutely.
For sure. But I think you're being a bit modest. You have had a lot of accomplishments, and what you do for the community is amazing too. So.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Well. That's all right, though. This episode's about you. And that's actually why I wanted to bring you on, Joe, specifically, is because of this vast portfolio that you have, and, this variance in so many different types of projects. We've gotten a couple questions asking about, how do I know when my game specifically is done? But I think that can apply to so many of your other pursuits and endeavors too. So I'd like to ask, when an idea strikes you for your book, your game, or your summit, anything related to this creative process, how do you personally plot out what needs to be done to bring it to life?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, because as a creative person, and when you start out, you might just have, one game idea and you're working on that and you can kind of focus on that. But after you've been doing it for a little while, the ideas just keep coming, whether it's for, a blog post, a video, more and more game ideas. So you have to kind of balance all the different ideas you're working on. And what I like to do is I like to have games that are at different stages. So I love it when I have, some games that are at the early idea stage where, it's just fresh and new and it's something really exciting. Other ones that are a little bit further along, that I'm in the playtesting stage, and then others that, we're getting close to completion, or that I'm maybe pitching or preparing to, launch myself, kind of thing. So I think part of it is just having ones at different stages you can always bounce back and forth to, because every game is different, and every game will take a different amount of effort and time to bring it to completion. Some games will just come together so easily and naturally. The idea, you put it on the table and it's like, okay, this is already clicking, and then it's just making like minor tweaks, continuing to play test it and just refine it. And other ones you'll be working on and you'll totally scrap and start over, put it on the shelf, bring it back a year later, and 3 years later you're still working on this idea and trying to figure out what is it about this game that is not working, and how can I bring it forward. So I think a lot of it is just recognizing which ones you're most passionate about, which ones have the most, possibility, to be a good product, to be a great game, and, focusing your attention on the ones that you think that have the most potential. And then, just plotting out whatever you need to do. And quite often with the creative pursuit, it's hard to say, okay, I want to get this game done by such and such a date, especially if you're pitching it to publishers. There's no like hard and fast deadline. It's just more, when do you feel it's ready? And, when I feel a game is ready is generally when the feedback that I'm getting from playtesters is quite positive, that they're very much enjoying it. In terms of things that they would change or things that they don't like, it's just very, very minor things. And it's more like a personal taste kind of thing, that if I made that change, it might make the game slightly different, but not necessarily better. And the playtesters are generally asking me questions like, where can I buy this game? When's it coming out? Can I get a copy right now? Can we play again? Like if you're getting that consistently, then you're at a really good stage for pitching it. Or if you want to run your own Kickstarter, your game is pretty solid and you can start to put things together. So those are the kind of things. And I've heard other designers say, when you're sick of playing your game, it's getting pretty close as well. It's just kind of a joke. But at that point, you probably played it quite a bit. But hopefully it's still exciting to you, at least in some facet, at least in terms of, getting it out to the rest of the world and that type of thing. But those are a couple of the guidelines that I go with. Wow,
that is just a whole font of useful insights. I think people can just turn off now and be happy with this answer. But thank you, for going so in depth with everything. I couldn't agree more, Joe, that we're all a little bit biased with our own games too, I think. So making sure that we still love our babies, is a definite not hurdle for me. It's too easy for me, actually, and I think I need to start offering a little bit more of a critical eye at times. But all the kind of scheduling, I really like that answer too, because I was going to ask if there was any sort of timeline that you try to put things out, and your individualistic answer about each project, having its own worth, obviously, and its own lifetime, answers that to, I think, the best way.
For sure. And like if you're doing something where you're going to be publishing and producing the game yourself, like a Kickstarter, for example, for that, obviously you need to have some timelines, but you want to make sure your game is in a pretty solid position. And then you're going to go about, gaining your following, developing your Kickstarter page, getting the art and all those things. And for that, you very much do need a project plan. And for something like that, I would say, get your game to a pretty good state. And then you want to allow at least 8 to 12 months if you really want to do well in terms of being able to build that following, get everything in plan and in place, and kind of work backwards. Like if you're thinking about it right now, saying, okay, well, what's 8 months or what's 12 months from now? Okay, that's the date. Okay, if we wanted to get it out by that point, what are all the things you need to do before then? And kind of work backwards, figure out, what is it, building the following and, getting the graphic art and design so it looks really good, and doing the Kickstarter page and getting your video done and all those things, rule book, all these things that are necessary, then you absolutely do need to plan it out. But if it's more of a creative pursuit that you're pitching to somebody else, then there's no hard and fast deadlines, I would say.
Fantastic. Just fantastic. Joe, since I have you here, you're kind of, bound to answer anything that I ask. And I would just be curious, with, multiple books you said published and kind of dipping into event planning, I feel that a lot of these rules, these soft rules and kind of guidelines or things to be mindful of would apply as well. Have you noticed anything that may be different between organizing an event of 500 plus people versus trying to bring a game to life, whether it is, on your own or maybe even looking for a publisher to pitch it to?
For sure. And I think with an event or something like that, you have to be a little more stringent because you have a date set. Especially if, people have got tickets, they've, set aside the time and that kind of thing. Whatever you've scheduled, you have to pretty much stick to. Whereas, with a game you're going to have published by somebody else, there's no set deadlines. With a Kickstarter, you can even push that back. I mean, you might announce it, but then say, we need a little bit more time to get things ready or whatnot. And, generally people are totally fine with that.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have an event and people have bought tickets, people have taken their time off, whatever the case may be, you really have to have everything ready and in place. So for something like that, it's so imperative to have all the checks and balances in place and have people hired. If you want to have to do any like editing, if you have anything to record, if you want to get your guest speakers, have all those interviews and whatever you're doing for it ready well ahead of time. So you have plenty of time and you're not rushing. You're not leaving things till last minute. I've done other launches before where, I've been launching something and I'm still putting together, the email sequences and I'm still putting together videos for it and everything as I'm going along and, staying up the night before trying to get all done, and it really will burn you out. So the more you can have everything planned well ahead of time, have everything set up on your website so you're not doing all these last minute changes and worried about something going wrong, so you can test, make sure everything goes right. I mean, all those things are critical. And with something like a book though, I mean, that's a little bit more similar to like a Kickstarter. You're publishing, there's no set deadline. You might have something in mind, and it's always good to have a goal in mind, because if you're just thinking like, I'll put this out whenever I want to, you might never do it. So even if it's just an internal goal of, I want to get this out by September, or I want to have this done in 3 months, or whatever the case may be, and try to keep to that as best you can and let people know about it so they'll get excited about it when you go to launch. Because that's a big part of it, is having people interested when you go and launch, because otherwise it might fall flat. So there's a lot of planning involved in that, but events definitely more hard set, and then other things you're doing, it can be a little bit more flexible.
And it's just so funny, like hearing you talk about doing everything not quite at the last minute, but up to the last minute, just harkens back to so many kind of contest entries for myself, or even projects that I was finishing up in my university days. Just kind of digging deep, maybe or maybe not having the inspiration necessarily to start too early, because you can kind of put it off until later, and that's when the inspiration strikes, or that's when the lightning strikes, for me personally, which I'm trying to get much better at. But I love that parallel, how it's just a kind of universal concept in a lot of ways, and being prepared just helps so much, even if it's not so fun to be doing so, to kind of sit down and make sure that everything's all right in a row, because that is where a lot of the mistakes can happen. Or like, you plan out and you think you have everything, but then it turns out there's just like one aspect that's totally missing, that's maybe a bit bigger than it should be, and all this kind of thing. So that's really, really great.
Oh yeah, and I mean, you can plan as much as you want, and that will definitely help. But there's always going to be something small that trips you up, something you have to kind of figure out last minute, or something doesn't go wrong, you got a link wrong, whatever, you have to make corrections. But the more you plan, the less chance that is going to happen, or the smaller that will be if you had time to test things out, have other people kind of go through it, make sure everything's prepared, and then hopefully you've planned a little bit of that time in your schedule for anything that goes wrong. Because the other thing is, things always take longer than you expect. Every day I say, okay, these are all the things I want to get done, and I'm either going to be working late, or pushing things to the next day, because little things, especially due to technology and that kind of thing, things can go wrong and take more time than expected. So it's always good to prepare and give yourself more time, more padding. If you're doing a Kickstarter project, anything, give yourself more time than you think is going to be necessary, especially if you're doing things for the first time. It's going to possibly take twice as long as it would otherwise. And then once you've done it, then it becomes a lot more familiar, and you'll get through it a lot quicker the next time.
Couldn't agree more. Even just talking with you, I feel so much more motivated to get what I do need on my checklist done today. And I'm hoping, I know I will promise you, Joe, that I will get those things completed by the end of the day. Absolutely. And so, Joe, I think don't want to take too much more of your time, but I do have one last thing that I would like to ask, is about Relics of Rajavahara. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Rajavahara, very close. It's a tricky one, and probably one I would, if I could go back in time, probably rename, because people do have a little bit hard time spelling and saying.
Oh, it is very iconic, though, I'll tell you that. And just to wrap it, or kind of bring it back to design really quickly, is what was maybe the milestone or pinnacle moment that you felt that Relics was complete?
Yeah, I mean that's kind of a tricky one, and with that game, it went through different phases. I
Hmm.
almost still think I'm not sure if it's complete, um, but because there's always more ideas, there's always more things you can do. But those those go with the expansions, and I'm
Truly.
already planning for that. But I think when I was playtesting the game and just getting people saying, like, even if they just played a couple levels and they're like, oh, this is really cool, or this really reminds me of a game I used to play on the old Nintendo, the NES, or
Hmm.
a puzzle game that I like to play, kind of thing. Like, people were like, there was a familiarity with it, but they also really appreciated the fact that it was tabletop, it was tactile, you were doing things, manipulating things with your hands and that kind of thing, solving these puzzles. When I was hearing that, and I actually did have a publisher that had some interest in it, and he took it for a little bit and was evaluating, but he came back and said he wasn't sure how he would go about marketing. He loved the game, but he wasn't sure how to market it. And even at the point where I handed it to him, I kind of had in the back of my mind, maybe this is something that I want to kickstart and release myself, because I had seen some other games do well on Kickstarter, particularly solo games like, for example, Hostage Negotiator and Unbroken and
Right.
some others. And I talked to Artem, who created Unbroken, and how he went about building his following and everything. And I thought, this is something that I could probably do on my own. I was really getting into solo games at that point, and interacting with the solo gaming group. And there's a group on Facebook of over 20,000 people there, and so I started engaging with them, not just necessarily about my game, but just about games I was playing, games they were playing, looking for recommendations, sharing other games that I enjoyed. And then kind of gradually got to, well, I'm working my own solo game here, what do you guys think about this? What do you think about a theme? Like, I didn't have a solid theme for it, so I posted it there, and I had some ideas. I was like, maybe like an NES style pixelated game, maybe like an adventure Indiana Jones style. And I think I had one other idea, and Indiana Jones one really resonated with people, and people were like, yeah, that looks really cool. Like, if we could do like a puzzly game that looks like that with Indiana Jones style. And I started posting more and more of the art as I was getting it in, and I was just getting really good positive feedback and people saying how interested they were in it. And at that point I thought, you know what, I have something here. It's a little different than all the other games out there, but still something familiar that people kind of can connect to, with whether it's with that nostalgia, or they really like puzzles, or something to kind of bring that in. And I kind of thought, maybe I have something here. And I was feeling pretty confident going into the Kickstarter that it would at least fund. I was hopeful of that. So I think leading into it, as I was going through, the confidence kind of built up more and more, closer to the Kickstarter, and I knew that I had it was a good idea to go and do this on my own.
Totally. And it definitely paid off, as we had seen with the successful funding of the campaign. I think that becoming immersed and integrated into a community cannot be overstated. Absolutely. We want to provide, not only value to ourselves, but if you can give more than you take, that's just even better, in my opinion. And so I'm so happy to hear that's how it worked out for you, Joe. And I am wishing you continued success moving forward with whatever else is kind of on the next horizon for you.
Awesome. Well, I agree with you completely there, Ben. The value of community is so huge, whether it's, just giving back, helping others, letting them see what you're working on and letting them get excited. It just kind of all comes around and snowballs. You help others and they want to help you, and, you come up with something awesome, then you're going to get, raving fans, and they're going to tell other people about it. So it's just an overall good thing, and great. It just makes you feel good to give back to the community and help others out. And, usually it turns out well for you if you do unto others, and then you'll have good things come back to you.
The golden rule. Joe, just final thought here, or question then, is if anyone would like to connect with you after this episode or interview, what would be the best way or ways for them to do that?
Sure. So if they want to check out anything that I'm working on, my board game design course, or any books that I'm working on, you can check out my website, boardgamedesigncourse.com. You can find me on Facebook and on Twitter, Crazy Board Game Guy. That's Crazy BRD Game Guy, and Instagram as well. So yeah, just check me out there, and probably see everybody around in one of the groups as well.
Very fitting. Oh yeah, and hopefully we can see each other come this time next year.
Oh, that would be nice. I would love to.
Well, thanks again, Joe, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks so much, Ben. This is a lot of fun, and thanks for having me on the show.
Always. Bye.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed this new kind of podcast format, or series perhaps, that we can start with other individuals from the community. If you did, leave us a comment below letting us know just that. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, and click that bell icon so that you can stay notified about when the next video goes up. As always, I'm Ben. This has been another episode of the Board Game Blueprint, and together, let's build something great.